So yeah, thank you, Karen, and thanks, John, for inviting me. I'm not going to take up too much of your time. I think I've got 20 minutes. I expect I won't use quite all of that because probably what's really important about this bit of work that we did is really what's happening to it now. And I think Harish is going to talk about that next. So I don't want to eat into Harish's time. But we did a project, as Karen said, thinking about how we could really understand and identify what patients with IgA nephropathy needed to know about. And I'll just go through the sort of brief bits about where it came from. Over the years, we've always tried to do patient-centered research. So that's research that focuses around the patient, but it's hard sometimes to know or maybe not immediately clear what that means. What is patient-centered with research? Is it the patient right in the middle with everyone sort of poking and prodding them and staring at them and looking at them and asking them questions and taking their blood and scanning their organs? Not really that at all. Patient-centered research is many things, but one of the things it certainly is including patients in research. And that doesn't just mean as subjects to be studied, but it means including them from the very first point at which you have a research idea, or asking them indeed for their research ideas. And so from the ground up, making sure that the research that we're always trying to do is focused around what patients really need, what they need to know, and how to help them with the difficulties that they're facing. And that's nothing new, really, patients, including patients in research. For 20, 25 years, this has been an increasing thing. And you can't write a grant application these days without filling in huge boxes about the ways you've included patients in your research. And there are lots of traditional ways of doing these things, whether that's through these things called PPI events or PPIE events, which is patient participant involvement in engagement events, where you get a group of patients with a condition, perhaps IgA nephropathy, in a room, and you tell them about all the bits of research that you're doing and ask them for a steer on how they think you could make it better or make it more acceptable to the patients. Or in some instances, you ask them what they think we should be focusing our research on. You can also send out surveys to patients to get an idea about whether they think the things you're researching are useful or things that you should be focusing on more. Or you can get some sort of more formally people together and do focus group meetings where you really try and hone down on the hows and the wheres and the whys of how you should be doing all that sort of research. And when we do write grant applications, we have to tell grant committees exactly how we've done this, where we've done this, and what changes were made as a result of patient involvement. And that's all very good, very important. But there are some problems with that. And that is, it's very small, usually small groups of patients. So oftentimes a PPIE event will have between 6 and 10 people in it. And truthfully, I can think of the ones that we've done over the years. Oftentimes it's the same patients, and that's not to say that's a bad thing. That's not absolutely not to diminish the input of the patients that we've had who've come to our patient involvement events. But those patients tend to be a bit more expert than many of the patients, and maybe even more engaged with their care, have a greater understanding of research from a medical point of view. And I'm not always sure in the past that we have managed to get the representation correct in terms of the diversity of inclusivity, whether that's to do with people's protected characteristics or the types of diseases that they have. And I also think that when you, as an investigator, gather a group of patients together for an event, I or Jonathan or Karen or whoever, we've done it for a reason. And that reason, no matter how clever you are about designing your event, will always come through. That reason will come through into your event, and it will bias in some ways the conversations you have. So if I come up with a load of ideas, it's not nobody, some people will. It would be pretty unusual for people to tell me they were all rubbish. And sometimes I need to be told that they're all rubbish. So there is a bit of bias introduced, I think, just by arranging these events with perhaps more expert patients. So John and I and Karen and a few other people, we thought that there may be other ways we could do our PPI engagement events that got rid of some of that bias to some extent. So social media. Social media is a term we all use in everyday life, and it's something I think pretty much everybody now is involved with. And I was involved with social media quite early on, and was one of the early people that tried to do medical education through social media with a variety of things. And very quickly, when you're trying to sort of do education through social media, you can see that networks of people, like-minded people, pop up. So if you look at my social media channels, or Twitter, for instance, I'm friends with people that think the same as me and are interested in the same sort of things, and we discuss similar sorts of things. And that's because I'm a doctor and I'm a researcher, and I share those kind of ideas. But the same is also true of every other group you can think of. So business people, public servants, anybody at all, and patients as well. And if you look at the scale of social media, you start to see why this might be quite something good to sort of tap into. So this is a little bit old now, but back in 2018, there were 7.6 billion people on the planet, and 4 billion of those were daily internet users. And of those, 3.1 or 3.2 million used social media every day. And almost exclusively, they used and accessed social media through their telephones. So, 40% of the world's population every day in real time are relaying information about their lives and communicating with other people searching for information. It's a very, very powerful, huge percentage of the world. And what's that done for users? Well, it's connected people like never before. It's broken down boundaries, largely of nation. It's broken down hierarchical structures, so seniority isn't so important. Everybody's, and this is a good thing and a bad thing, everybody's got the same voice and can voice their views on the same platform. And it's connected people, as I say, who are like-minded. And it's also true that it has allowed patients with rarer diseases, such as IgA nephropathy, to connect with each other in a way that they couldn't before. So if you had patient support groups before, if you were lucky, there might be a few people in your locality who had a similar disease to you, if you have a rare disease, like IgA nephropathy. If you were really lucky, maybe one or two of those people in that group had a similar experience to you that you could share. But with the advent of social media and social networking, the need to be geographically close goes away. And actually, you can get a lot of that support through the computer or through your telephone. So our questions, as they were back in, I think, 2016 or 2017, was could we use analysis of social media to identify unmet needs of patients with IgA nephropathy? The second thing we wanted to know was could we use that information to produce resources to respond to those unmet needs? And the third thing, which is crucially important, is could we use that data to then develop and design future research studies? And I'm going to talk you through those, and you can tell me if we were successful at the end. So you can't do anything without a bit of money, and I must say we're very grateful to Kidney Research UK. We wrote a grant and got an innovation grant from Kidney Research UK, along with researchers at the University of Salford, to do an analysis to test those three questions. And if you were interested, there's a study protocol freely available on the internet. Just by searching a couple of things, you'd find it without too much bother. And if you want it, just send me a message at the end and I can send it to you. So what we did was we found a Facebook group in the UK, which had 2,000 members, all patients with IgA nephropathy. And we approached them to see if they would let us have their the posts that they'd been putting on their Facebook group over the preceding 2 years. And we spoke to the person that owned that was the administrator for the group, and that person independently spoke to the group members, and they were all absolutely in agreement that we could have that data as long as we didn't include any of their patient details, so their names and dates of birth and all that sort of things. So the group of researchers in Salford went into, once we had the permissions and the ethics approvals, went into the Facebook group, and they took all the posts that had been written in that group over the previous 2 years, and they collected them all into a great big database. And that included the initial posts and the response to those posts, so the likes and all that sort of stuff, and then the comments underneath, where people have been commenting and discussing each of the posts underneath. And 95% of those posts were from patients or family members of patients who had IgA and nephropathy. And we did a few bits and bobs with that. This is a very complicated slide, but the 3 bits that I think I need just to tell you about, which are important to know what we did, are these 3 bits here. So the first thing we did, once we'd made that big database with all of those posts in it, was we convened a traditional focus group where we got patients in a room and asked them to tell us all the things that they thought patients with IgA nephropathy would need to know about or wouldn't know about. So we did that as a first thing, and I'll show you the reason why we did that in a second. The second thing we did was down in this circly bit here, was the researchers in Salford are very good at looking at links between words and how words fit together and meanings within posts. And they read through and categorized every single post within that database. And they categorized all of the words, the frequency of the words, and they came up with all of the themes for things people were discussing. And once you had the themes for what people were discussing, you could look at the content again, categorized by theme, and then draw out the meaning. So we had the themes of what people were talking about, and then we could put that back into the database and then look at the content meaning behind it. And then the final part of it was to qualitatively analyze those posts, not just for meaning, but for inference, and for what the support people were giving to each other was like. So the first thing I told you we did was we did a patient focus group. And here are the things from the focus group that patients who were patients with IgA nephropathy that we'd surveyed as you would in a traditional sense. These are the things that they told us patients would want to know about. They told us people would want to know about diagnosis, how the disease progresses, the dietary things that might influence IgA nephropathy, what medications there were for IgA, information on staging, and what support there was that was available. Okay, so that's what patients told us from the focus group. This is how they did compared to what we found from the social media analysis. They got most things wrong. So patients were interested a bit in diagnosis and they were interested a bit in disease, but there was very little from that social media analysis about disease progression, medications, information on staging, or extra support. Here are the things unsolicited things people from the Facebook group were interested in knowing about. Overwhelmingly, patients were interested in how to manage their symptoms. That was the thing that was affecting their lives the most. That was the thing they weren't getting support with. Those were the things that they didn't have enough information about. And it wasn't even mentioned in the patient focus group meeting, actually, that symptoms would be so pervasive and such a problem. And yes, they were interested a bit in diagnosis and terminology and a bit in treatment and a bit in diet, but really it was mostly about symptoms. And when you broke it down, the symptoms came in various bits. There was tiredness and fatigue, symptoms related to blood pressure, symptoms related to swelling, itching, headache. But the one that stood out the most was this one at the top. Of the 600 posts about symptoms, 130 of them were about pain, and pain particularly in the kidneys. And I'm a doctor, I've trained a while now, and we are told at medical school that kidneys only cause pain when they're really badly infected or when they're blocked. And we're told at medical school that kidney diseases like IgA nephropathy don't cause pain. And here's an example, it's not a word-for-word example of the types of thing people were saying on the Facebook group. I'm getting really bad pain from my kidneys. It's worse after I get an infection. Sometimes I get blood in my urine with it. And here's the bit that's really upsetting for me as a doctor and for most of my doctor colleagues and medical colleagues. When I've mentioned it to my consultant in the past, they all said, it wasn't my kidneys. Kidneys don't cause pain like this. It must be muscular, but it can't be, can it? It's so frustrating to have these symptoms dismissed. And there it was, written down over and over and over again. And if you take one thing from this talk, I now acknowledge that kidneys must cause pain. And I think Harish is going to talk about that a little more. So the second thing we wanted to know then was, having identified this sort of vast array of things that patients wanted to know about, was could we take that information and make some resources that would help patients understand or live with or have a better experience of their condition. And we did this with a group of patients, and we did it with the multi-professional team. And we all got together over a couple of days before COVID. I have to say, it wasn't that long before COVID. It's one of the last things we did before COVID, I think. And we spent a couple of days filming some videos together over in Leicester. Some of them talking about the bits of research we were doing, but most of them talking about how to deal with the symptoms that people are experiencing, how to manage the dietary things that people were struggling with, all in response to what we found from the analysis. And John was absolutely the star of this, as you can see here. He loved getting his makeup put on. There's Roger, who did the filming for us. And they were a good couple of days. But a lot of work went in beforehand to make sure we had the scripts exactly right, and that we planned it all in the way we wanted to. And all of those videos now are freely available and uploaded on the Leicester IGA YouTube channel. And I had a look at them the other day, and I was really pleased to see they've been viewed quite a lot. So side effects of medication has been reviewed 2,000 times. What is a good diet when you have IgA nephropathy has been viewed 3,500 times. And managing IgA nephropathy has been viewed 4,500 times. And I don't want to say it's better than every other resource, but if you look at some of the other resources that are on there, these have been viewed quite a lot. So that seems like quite a good thing for someone that was involved in doing this bit of research. And the other thing that was very evident doing this piece of work was we wondered at the beginning, before we started, was how we'd get that back to people. And I always said, actually, if we've done this right, if we've done the analysis right, and we've worked out what people need, the Facebook group and the patient networks that are supporting each other, they already exist. Our job is not to go in and tell people what we think they want them to do. Our job is to understand what people want through this kind of analysis, and then feed it, these networks, the information that they seem to be lacking. And if that works, and the results and the resources we produce are worthwhile, then just this sort of network effect means that they'll get to the people they want to get to. And I think that's what we're seeing now with the sort of success of those videos that are on the YouTube channel. So the final part, can we use the data that we discovered to design and develop future research studies? Well, I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to leave that to Harish, who I think is talking in a couple of minutes. And I'm going to leave it there, actually. It was really great fun to work on that project. We learned an awful lot, and I hope we've sort of showed a model for how these types of bits of work can be done in the future. And all of that information that I've shown you now is published, and again, easy to find. If you want the papers or any more information, I'll be very happy for you to contact me. Thank you very much. I must also thank, Professor Barrett, Professor Ormandy, Christina Basilica, Tom Oates, and Christian Klausner from Salford and Leicester, and of course, Kidney Research UK for funding it in the first place.